Hi, my name is Nikos Bafidis. I'm from the Junior Senior School in Nicosia, Cyprus, back with another video for you, and this one's all about preparing for the Microsoft Certified Educator examination, otherwise known as the MCE exam. If you like this video or any of my other videos, make sure to subscribe or click on the like button. Let's get started. Okay, so what is the Microsoft Certified Educator exam? Well, essentially, it assesses educators on their understanding on how to apply technology tools in 6 different domain areas of the 21st century learning design skills in their class. It's not whether they are proficient in using the specific technology tools. And I hear this a lot, educators saying to me, but I'm not very good with computers, I'm computer illiterate, essentially putting themselves down. My response to that is, if you've got a smartphone, you're already using a device which has 100,000 times the processing power than the computer required to land a spaceship on the moon. So you're already using an immense amount of technology or processing power. But still, it's not about using the technology. It's all about innovative teaching practices which can help support student learning and prepare them for tomorrow's world. And to do this, we identify the 6 key elements which need to be learned. And these elements have been identified as collaboration, skilled communication, knowledge construction, self-regulation, real-world problem solving and innovation, and the use of ICT for learning. Now, each one of these areas or domain areas have a rubric that you have to learn, and you have to learn it well. You have to understand the key components of each of the rubrics and how it can be implemented in a piece of work, or at least identify the areas of each rubric in a given piece of work so that you can improve on that, you can elevate that piece of work so that it meets the highest value possible in the rubric for that domain, whether it's collaboration, self-regulation, knowledge construction. Okay, so how do we prepare for the exam? If you've got the time, then I strongly suggest you complete the learning path provided by Microsoft Education. Now, I've got the links here, and I'm going to provide the links for you as well. They're going to be in the link section at the bottom of this video. Now, the learning path will essentially give you, and if you haven't applied for Microsoft Education, I've got the links here. Go to education.microsoft.com and simply sign in with your 365 account, or if you've got a school account, sign in with your school 365 account. And once you've signed in, you can go to the courses at the top and choose the learning path and do the 21st century learning design learning path. It is an amazing path. It focuses entirely on the 21st century learning design skills. It will explain everything you need to know with examples, and you get a little quiz at the end of each unit. Completing this learning path will give you 7,500 points, and you will also gain 6 badges. Now, because the 21st century learning design model is the focus of the MCE exam, this learning path will give you a fundamental understanding of each one of these 6 skills that you need to learn and understand. Okay, so how do we actually start preparing for the actual exam now that the date is coming closer for the examination? If you've taken the learning path already, that's absolutely fantastic. You've already got a deep understanding of the skills required. Now that the exam date is coming closer, we need to actually start studying. So I've got a link here for you where you can have access to a link to the learning path, but essentially to the OneNote, which contains absolutely everything that you need to know. You can find the link to the OneNote also in education.microsoft.com. And the OneNote actually looks like this. Here's the OneNote. Okay, so you've essentially got the 6 rubrics here. You've got an introduction section which basically introduces the 21st century learning design to you, shows you the key areas, the 6 key areas, tells you who developed it, so on and so forth. What you want is these 6 key areas here. These are the areas that you need to get the rubrics from. Now, each area, collaboration, skill communication, knowledge construction, and all the rest of them, have exactly the same pages inside. In other words, if we have a look at collaboration, which is this one, inside we have 6 pages. If we have a look at self-regulation, again, we've got 6 pages. So which of these are the important ones? Well, I work a little bit backwards. I like looking at the tree, and this essentially shows me the rubric. I'm a very visual person. I'm dyslexic, so visual aids for me are absolutely fantastic. Some people, however, prefer the text version of the rubric, and you can find that here. Okay, so they find this easy because just remembering the last one here actually contains all the steps of the previous ones. So with these like 3 points here, you've actually got the rubric covered. Each line here is just a repetitive of the previous one, and it just adds what the next level of the rubric is. So if you just learn this last one, you're basically covered. Personally, I prefer the tree. Now, what's important is you need to remember the rubric. So each one of these has got a rubric. If we have a look here, real world problem solving, and here again we've got our tree. They're not very big, and you've got again the rubric as a text form. Okay, now what do we need to learn apart from understanding the rubric? Well, each one of these has got different areas to go to the next level: problem solving, real world problem, innovation. If we look at collaboration, you've got required students are required to do to work in pairs, share responsibility, substantive decisions. What are all these? What do they mean? You really need to understand what these each level means and when it is actually being met. So to do that, you need to look at the big ideas. And this is why I say I work backwards. I start from the tree, I have a look at it, understand, and now you can see the big ideas actually goes over each one of the levels of the rubric, giving you a clear understanding of when interdependent work is actually met and when it is not. And then you've got substantive decisions here, shared responsibility, and so on and so forth. So the big ideas and the tree is essentially the key of the MCE exam. Now you've got an introduction of each one which basically explains. Now you do need to read all of this, but your focus afterwards, once you've read everything, is going to be these two things: the big ideas and the tree. So you've got an introduction of each one. Anchor lessons. Now the anchor lessons, some people get misunderstandings and they think these are the perfect lessons. They're not. They're just sample lessons of things that you might meet or some kind of lessons that you've got, and they don't meet the highest level of every rubric. Okay, they're just there to give you a good idea. At the bottom, you've got collaboration. So this one, we're looking at collaboration right now. So here it's got collaboration in action. Here you actually see a unit of work that was actually implemented. Then it gives you the case scenario and explains the description of the unit of work, how it was carried out, so on and so forth. So these are really good to get a good understanding of an excellent piece of work from this unit, collaboration. Okay, and it says here this unit of work was carried out by Paula Vaughan and 2 other teachers in a multi-grade classroom setting in Finland. The 3 teachers worked with 35 children who were in 1st and 2nd grade and were 7 to 9 years old. And then it just goes over it. So it's really good to get a good understanding, and you get some pictures here of the work that they did. So it actually shows collaboration in action. So again, on each one of these, what you're really focusing on afterwards, after you've read everything, you know, you've got a good understanding, is the big ideas here of each one, getting to understand each piece of the rubric well, and then remembering the rubric tree. Now, either the tree or the text version. And that's essentially what you need for the MCE exam. Let's go to the next section, which is going to be some sample questions for you. Okay, so what kind of questions do we get in the exam? Well, there are 3 main types of questions. The first type is a question which is based on one of the 6 rubrics. So you get a question, it will tell you it's about this particular rubric, and you have to answer the question focused on that rubric. The other style of question are questions which are focused on a case study. So case study, you'll be given some text to read, and the questions will be focused upon that case study. Now, the questions will not be focused on one rubric. Each question or a few of those questions will be focused on one rubric, and some of the other questions will be focused on another rubric. So you need to be careful and just read which rubric you're working on for that question. The third type of questions, these are more like good teaching practices based scenarios. You're given a scenario, you're asked what would you do or what would be the best solution. Don't overthink it. There's not much studying you can do for this. If you're here viewing this exam, you've already put yourself out there, you're already a good educator, you want to better yourself, so probably what you would do in real life is the correct thing to do. So read whatever the scenario is and then think, what would I do? And don't try and think. What most educators do wrong is they think that what they would do is wrong and there's a better way to do it. There isn't. What you would normally do in that scenario, that's going to be the right answer. So again, there's not much studying there to do. If you read the scenario, you'll understand what I mean. Okay, so let's have a look at, I think the most important one is to have a look at what a case study is and what it looks like. So a case study will have several questions associated with it, different types of questions, and the good thing is a case study will be at the top of every question. Okay, now I haven't covered this part. How many questions are there in the exam? Well, there are 40 questions in the exam. However, one question, for example, let's say you're given 4 scenarios and you have to match the level for each one. I consider each one of those 4 as a separate question. So although it's one question, there's 4 things you have to do. So I say 4 questions. So overall, there's about 100 questions. And the reason why I say 100 is because if you get 2 of those wrong and 2 of them right, you get the marks for the 2 that you got right. You don't have to get all of them correct to get the marks for that particular question. So I prefer to say it's 100 questions in 1 hour, 60 minutes. So the case study, you'll have 3 case studies, and each case study will have a different amount of questions associated with it. And the good thing is the case study is always at the top. Now, again, if you're not a fast reader, if English is not your first language, you're not a native English speaker, and or like me, you're dyslexic, reading all these case studies can be daunting and takes a lot of time. So this is why I come in with this tutorial to help you with some tips and tricks so you don't have to read all of that material. Each question will be focused on a particular rubric. So the first thing to identify is what rubric that question is for. And a case study will have things like the general overview, description of students. Here's what one looks like. Now, I've taken each part and put it as a separate screenshot here, but you can see there's a fair amount of text that you'd read. Okay, so the general overview is here. You see there's a vertical scroll bar here, so there's more text. And then you've got things like the description of students, so on and so forth. And there's quite a bit there to read. Personally, I've had educators that didn't even realize or forgot about reading the case study at the top, and they passed just by looking at the question, what rubric the question was focused on, and what the idea was about that question, and they answered the questions correctly. Okay, so what kind of questions do we have? We've got yes, no type questions. Now, yes, no type questions, I think we all know what they are. Multiple choice. You can see this is like one question, but there are 4 things that you're going to click yes or no for. Okay, and so I see this as 4 questions. It's very, very basic. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement facilitates level 5 of the collaboration rubric, otherwise select no. And you get these statements and you have to click whether it's yes or no. No, these are not the questions in the exam. Okay, and if we look at the rubric here, so this is the question. If we look at the rubric and the actual answers, it says, and this is where the tricks come in. The first one. Okay, so students collaboratively learn their role and obligation of citizenship. This, we see the rubric here, the first, to go to level 2, then they have to be working in pairs or groups, and there's nothing about them working as pairs or groups or anything about shared responsibility, anything about substantive decisions or interdependent work. So this is going to be no. Students working independently to research straight away. I'm not even going to read the rest of this. The word interdependently, I know that's to give me a level 5 in the rubric. It says here students work independent. That's going to be a yes. Teams will work, again, as soon as I see the word teams will work collaboratively, straight away, the fact that they're teams will take me to a level 2. So to become a level 2, your students are required to work in pairs or groups, and the team is a group. If they don't meet any of the rubrics, and be very, very careful here, guys, because what I've seen with other educators is if they don't meet any of the levels here, they think it's a 0. It's not. If they don't meet any of these at all, then you're at level 1. There is no level 0. So level 1 means that you're not meeting any of the requirements for collaboration. And that's the same for all the rubrics. Level 1 means you're not meeting any of the requirements for that particular domain, whether it's a collaboration, communication, knowledge, construction, so on and so forth. Next one, students interpret, analyze, and evaluate. Now, if I know my rubrics, I know that is part of, here we go, this is part of the knowledge construction. So if we see knowledge construction, we'll go to the big ideas. We can see here that knowledge construction, the first level is interpretation, analysis, and synthesis of data and evaluation. So this is the wrong rubric. So that's going to be a no. Okay, so you can see there, just by looking at key words in the questions, we can answer the questions correctly. Now, if you get one of these wrong, you still get the grade for the ones that you get right. Next type of question is complete the statement style of question. So here you will be given a question. The first thing you need to look at is to see which rubric this question is about. So that's what I'm going to look for here. It's real world problem solving, and it will give you the learning activities are considered real world problem solving because, and choose one. And you will click the drop down arrow there, and you will choose one that actually is correct for that answer. And then you've got another one here, students do innovate by, and then you click on the arrow and choose the right one. Again, although this is one question, I actually consider it as 2, because if you get one of these wrong, you get the other one right, you get the marks for that one. Match the level type of questions. Again, here we've got 4 different types of explanations here. You can see up here, it gives you the rubric in this one. I've highlighted it yellow. So in this particular one, it actually gives you the rubric. But see how much time it's going to take you if you're learning the rubrics now, or you can't remember them, to read through these, to analyze and see which level each one of these statements falls in. That's going to take you a long time. So this is what I'm saying. Even if it does give you the rubrics at the top, not very helpful. Okay, the first thing that we need to see is which rubric this question is about. So all these levels here to do with knowledge construction rubric, and you would read these statements here and then try and match the level by dragging them. So let's analyze these. Let's look at the first one. Students in a social studies class memorize capital cities of the world. The fact that they have to memorize, there's no knowledge construction, straight away that's going to be a level 1. Remember, there's no level 0. So if it doesn't meet any of the levels of the rubric, that's going to be a level 1. Next one. Students in an art class, so this is to do with art, learn about forced perspective. They are then introduced to watercolors and assigned to create a simple painting of railroad tracks. So yes, they've learned about perspective. They apply their knowledge. There is knowledge construction, but it's still all within the art class. And if we look at the rubric, you can only go to a level 5 if it is interdisciplinary. And that basically means if more than one subject area is included for this knowledge construction. And this is only focused in art, so it isn't. That's going to be a level 4. We can see students are required to apply their knowledge in a new context, and they are, because they're doing it in painting. They learned it in theory, and now they're painting a railroad track. That will take it to a level 4. Okay, the next one, computer science students apply their programming skills to write a game that calculates complex trajectories to hit targets. So here they've got a multiple of different disciplinary, so it is interdisciplinary. They're applying programming, they're learning about trajectories. There's a lot of maths there involved as well. So that's going to be a level 5, because again, if we see here, it's interdisciplinary, will take you to level 5. And the last one, students apply their winter fitness training and science study. Right, again, we can say, I'm not going to read all of this, but they're using fitness training and science study. So it's interdisciplinary again. And they're applying this knowledge that they've got. And it's from 2 different disciplines. So again, that will take you to level 5. Evaluate the text type questions. Now here you're given a small scenario. And if you look towards the bottom of the question always, you're going to see the action part of the question, basically what it is you have to do. And it says here, according to the 21st century learning design, use of ICT. So this is to do with ICT for learning. To be an effective educator, the best resource or resources to support your educational outcome would be to take photos of a ball and cube and display them to the class using a PowerPoint presentation. It then says review the underlined text, basically this part here, the underlined text. If it makes the statement correct, select no changes needed. So does this actually support use of ICT for learning? Well, no, because they're not actually using ICT in any way. So, and then it says no changes needed. If it does, well, that's not going to be the right one because it doesn't. And if the statement is incorrect, select the answer choice that makes the statement correct. Well, if we look at the other ones that we've got here, divide your students into teams of 3 to capture different light angles on ball and cube using a digital video camera. Well, there we go. We've got ICT there, but let's look at the other ones. Find a video about lighting on the internet and project it to the students. No, they're not using ICT, and just looking at videos on the internet is not actually use of ICT to support knowledge construction. Collaborate with the physical education class to supply models to study. Yeah, that doesn't even make any sense to me. So obviously, just without even reading the rest of this, number 2 is going to be the correct answer. And we can see if we look, so that's the right answer. If we look at the top and did analyze the rest of it, you actually see they've got 3 digital video cameras. So it does actually make sense here that divide your students into teams of 3. Well, it says teams of 3 because they've got 3 video cameras. But we can answer the question without even reading all of the text. Now, I'm not saying don't read the text. I'm just saying if reading is not your strong point, you're not a native English speaker, you might want to, especially if you're running short on time, skip reading the text and just look for the action statements in the question. Multiple choice style questions. We're all familiar with these. We have a question and then we've got a number of answers and we have to choose the right one. In this particular case, you have to choose 2 to get the question correct. So there are 2 correct answers. You have to select both of them. Again, you're given a small scenario. And then if we look at the bottom part of the question, we see the action part of it. First thing we're looking for is what rubric are we going to be working with? And this is the self-regulation rubric. Okay, and here it says that which 2 modifications to the learning activities would provide an opportunity for self-regulation according to level 4. So we have to elevate something to a level 4 of the self-regulation rubric. And if we look at the statements, we're going to see it says you require the students to use ICT. Well, that's got nothing to do with regulation, with self-regulation. You require the student pairs to plan their own work and meet with them weekly to assess their progress and provide guidance. This is the first correct answer. We're going to see the rubric in a minute and see why. The student pairs schedule meetings with their teachers of other subjects and request interdisciplinary support. Iffy that one. It doesn't have to be interdisciplinary. Students design their consulting tasks to be independent. Okay, and then it's got you establish learning goals for your students and provide them with a rubric for grading their work at the end of the project. Again, that's not part of it. Let's have a look at the skills. So these are the 2 which are the correct ones, and we will discuss why. So this one here, and students design their consulting tasks to be independent. So if we have a look at the rubric, it basically says for it to be self-regulation, level 2, it has to be a long-term activity. Well, there's nothing that's there. Students plan their own work. So if we look here, students design their consulting tasks. That's them planning their own work here. So that will be 1 mark. That will be the first one. And if we look further down, it says students have opportunity to revise work based on feedback. So essentially, instead of just giving them a piece of work, they complete it, they submit it to you, mark it, and then give it back to them, and that's the end of it, or you're giving them some feedback. To be self-regulation and meet level 5, they have to be able to act on that feedback and then change whatever they've submitted, the piece of work, and then resubmit it so that it meets the requirements of the assessed piece of work. So giving them the opportunity to act on feedback is what it's all about. And that's basically the first one here. You require the student pairs to plan their own work and meet with them weekly to assess their progress and provide guidance. Okay, so these 2 here are the correct ones. Okay, let's go to the next. Now, skilled communication. This is probably the hardest rubric to learn. It is the only rubric which has got this double loop. Okay, so you've got this double loop, and you have to be a little bit careful with. So whenever you've got a question with skilled communication, it's the one where it is important that you actually read the question carefully. Okay, and the reason why is you need to do. It says here it can only be a level 4. In other words, the maximum level down here, level 4, if there is sufficient supporting evidence. So essentially, the rubric starts off with communication was extended or multimodal. So you've got two scenarios here. It can either be extended or multimodal to be considered as a level 2, let's say, of the communication rubric. Then, provide sufficient supporting evidence. Now, this is where the students have to provide evidence of the work that they've done. If they don't provide evidence, then you can never get to a level 4, but you can get to a level 3. So depending on this one here, if they've given supporting evidence, then if they've actually designed something for a particular audience, then it will become a level 3 if they have not provided sufficient evidence. If they haven't provided sufficient evidence and they haven't designed something for a particular audience, it stays at a level 2. Now, if they've designed something for a particular audience and there is supporting evidence of the work, then you can go to a level 4. If they've provided sufficient evidence, but they haven't designed for a particular audience, then they will go to a level 3. So they can get to a level 3 whether they design something for a particular audience or not, but that will depend on if they've given supporting evidence of their work. And this is the one where you need to be really careful of. Let's have a look at this question. Now, if we just look at the action part of the question, it says, how can this learning activity be modified to meet level 4 of the 21st century learning design rubric for skilled communication? Now, if I don't read this section here, because this is to do with skilled communication, and I just look through the answers, I look for student journalists are required to publish their report in the school paper. That's nothing to do with skilled communication. The video should be embedded in a PowerPoint presentation. Again, nothing to do with skilled communication. The video should target community leaders as the audience. Now, here we've got creating something for a particular audience. So that actually gives us, if we look at the rubric, that is that part here, designing for a particular audience. But to get to level 4, we also need provide sufficient supporting evidence. Student journalists are required to provide sources of their information. Okay, so that gives us this one as well. So we've got both of these, designing for a particular audience and sufficient evidence, as an answer. So which one's the correct one? This is why we need to read the question for skilled communication. And if we do read the question, it says students in the journalism class are assigned to work in pairs to create a video of each student reporting on a current event of interest to their peers. So they're presenting something, they're reporting to their peers. So in the question, we've already got this part here for a particular audience. What's missing is the sufficient evidence. And this is why the rubric for skilled communication, it's important to read all of the question. And that will be the correct answer. Student journalists are required to provide sources of their information. Okay, and that will elevate this exercise at the top to a level 4. Okay, that's everything to do with the questions. I've given you quite a lot of material. You've got a lot of insight there, which is really going to help you. To tell you a little bit about the exam is separated in sections. Now, remember, we have the rubrics at the top of some of the questions, about 25% of the question, or 30, somewhere around there. I can't remember. But because it's broken up into sections, after you complete a particular section in the exam, you can't go back. You can mark questions to review at the end, but you can't go back to the section. And what confuses educators many times is this. When you finish a section, let's say this section here, I've created this in PowerPoint, so it looks similar to what you would get. But when you finish a section, and this particular section, let's say, was 3 questions, it will tell you how many of those questions you've answered in that section, how many are unanswered, how many for you for review, and if you've marked anything for comments so you can send back to Microsoft. And then it says finish. Now, many people taking the exam, they take some time looking at this and they're too scared to click finish because they think, if I click finish, has it finished the assessment? It hasn't. And I put a sample time here, let's say, I don't know, say 54 minutes left of this exam. So when you click finish, it actually finishes that section of the exam. And then it will go to the next section. This next section might be various questions, or it may be a case study. When you finish that section, it will tell you the next section is so many questions. You get another page similar to this, and it will say you've answered so many questions of this section, so many unanswered. At the end of the exam, you've got the opportunity to review your questions if you've got time. Personally, I don't suggest you leave any questions unanswered to answer at the end of the exam. Chances are you won't have much time at the end of the exam. Okay, so when you see a screen like this and it says finish, don't be scared to click the finish. It just means you've finished with this section. Let's start the next section. And it will have so many questions to answer. And when you finish that section, you'll be faced with something similar again. Okay, so there, as I said at the beginning of this tutorial, there are some questions which are focused on good teaching practices, on things like Teams, Minecraft, OneNote, and learning tools. There's no point trying to study for absolutely every single application, knowing everything about every application. There's only a handful of questions like this usually. Again, I can't remember. It's been a long time since I took the exam, but if you know the general things, and usually because of lockdown and this, that, the other, we've all learned how to use things like Teams, and we know that Teams can be used to create channels, and we can set up meetings to collaborate with our students and have online lessons. With Minecraft, again, we know it's a game-based learning platform, and it's got programming. And one of the key features of it is you don't need to know programming to actually use Minecraft. With OneNote, again, we all know OneNote, or if you don't, it's an electronic notebook for students. We can share material on there, but the most important thing is that you've also got something like learning tools, and with learning tools, it basically helps the students to learn to read, and if they've got any learning difficulties. So here are some tips I've given. You can read through these. Anything which is to do with things like Immersive Reader is a tool that it reads text to students in OneNote. It allows you to meet the needs of all students. If Immersive Reader is an option, then it's probably the correct one. I've got a spelling mistake here. I need to change that to an. Any resource, any online resource, things like Sway, OneNote, OneDrive, Stream, all of these things give the ability to share with other students, and that offers collaboration. So all of these programs or applications which are online, they give you the ability to share. And if you get anything like that, can you share something, for example, a Sway or a file from OneDrive? Yes, you can. Some questions are application based. In other words, you'll only be asked on things that you probably already know. Things like what program would you use to create online meetings? Well, you'd use Teams. Other applications, just to know about what they do, with things like Sway forms. Let's say you want to do an assessment. What application would you use to do a quick assessment at the end of the lesson, so that you can basically assess student understanding of the lesson? Well, it wouldn't be Word or Excel. You'd use forms. So it's just basic general knowledge question. Minecraft was one of the things that I think educators have come out complaining a little bit about because they never use Minecraft. But you don't need to know anything about Minecraft. The only thing that you need to know is that it allows students to be creative, and they can learn in a comfortable environment, something that they're used to, and no prior knowledge of programming is required. There may be questions that will ask you what you would do in a particular teaching scenario. Again, don't overthink the questions. Think about your skills as an educator and what you would do in real life. That will probably be the right answer. Okay, some questions will have the rubric included at the top. Approximately 25% of the questions, 30%. Again, I noticed that, some questions had the rubric at the top, but because it's section based, if you are on a question, let's say on some skill communication, you remember that in the previous section the rubric was there and you can't remember it, you can't actually go back to the previous section. So it makes no difference whether the rubric's at the top or not. You should learn the rubrics by heart. That's it, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I really hope you take the MCE exam. It's really worth it if you're an educator. If you like this video tutorial, make sure you click like, but most importantly, make sure you subscribe. See you again in the next tutorial.